This is Damon Fordham, adjunct professor of history at the Citadel Military College in Charleston, South Carolina. And this evening I'm going to tell you about the Madison, Washington, and the Creole Slave Rebellion of 1841. You see, when I was writing my current book, the Black Folktales and Chronicles of South Carolina, I came across at the University of South Carolina's Caroliniana Library a group of unpublished stories that were written in the 1930s that were part of the Federal Slave Narratives Project, where they interviewed people who were born in slavery about their experiences. Well, a bunch of them were never published, and I managed to find a folder of the unpublished ones and got permission from USC to publish them for the book. And one of them, they interviewed a man by the name of Daniel Goddard, who was born in slavery in Columbia, South Carolina in 1863. But he was too young to remember his slave experience. However, his parents told him a whole lot of really interesting stories about slavery that turned out to be true. One of them was about Daniel Goddard's Uncle Thomas, his father's brother, who was part of the Madison, Washington Slave Rebellion of 1841. And here's the story. His father's brother was raised in Virginia, and Thomas was among the black people who were rounded up in Virginia in 1841 and put on a slave ship that was destined for New Orleans. However, these were not Africans who were unfamiliar with how things went on a ship or who couldn't speak English. These were African Americans, free black people who were taken into slavery and put on the ship. And they knew about ships. And one of them, Madison, Washington, took control of the ship. He caused the crew to rebel against the crew of the ship, and the black people overpowered them along with his Uncle Thomas, and they sailed for the West Indies, which at that time was under British control, which by 1834 they were free. So, therefore, they lived the rest of their lives in the West Indies in freedom. And later, Frederick Douglass wrote about this in a story called The Heroic Slave that was published in his newspaper. And you can still find it in Frederick Douglass's writings. Well, Daniel Goddard's parents also told him about the Amistad slave revolt that took place a couple of years earlier in 1839, in which the Africans led by Singbe out of Sierra Leone took control of the ship, and they were taken to the United States. But however, the courts found that they were illegally enslaved and sent back to Africa. Now, stories like this were often suppressed in the press in those days because they didn't want the whites to panic, and they didn't want to encourage blacks to do this type of thing. But Daniel Goddard's parents heard about these things, and they passed these stories down to young Daniel. And the most important thing here was that Daniel listened, and he remembered it when he told it to the interviewer back in the 1930s. And I managed to find this and put it in the book. So I say all this to tell you the importance of preserving stories of this kind, for one thing, because you find a lot of things that the history books may have missed out on, and you talk to people who lived through these things, and they can tell you some really fascinating stories, and when they tell them to you, write them down and preserve them so others may learn. This is Damon Fordham.